Hi everyone, welcome to another Yarn Scrap Friday with me, Laura, and in today's tutorial I'm going to be showing you how to crochet my teeny tiny baby Yoda. So I'm more of a Star Trek fan than a Star Wars fan, but I can't deny that a baby Yoda is so cute. So let's begin. Okay, so for this tutorial we're going to need 3 colours. We're going to need a brown, a green and a little bit of black for the eyes. And with that, this is a sport baby weight yarn, so it's a yarn weight of 2, but you can use any yarn that you like for this project. But with this yarn, I'm using a 3mm crochet hook, but you can use any hook that's suitable for the yarn that you're using. You're also going to need a yarn tapestry needle as well, and a pair of scissors as well, and a little bit of stuffing or just some yarn scraps for stuffing. So I've got some old yarn scraps here I'm going to use. Okay, so let's begin. So I'm going to start off with the green and we're just going to make the main body first, starting at the head, and you can use a magic circle or a chain 4 loop is fine. I'm going to go for a chain 4 loop, a little bit easier for beginners, even though my first one I did a magic loop. I always use the magic loop. But chain 4, 1, 2, 3 and 4, chain 4. Put our hook into our first chain, bring the yarn through and work a slip stitch. So bring it straight through the loop on your hook. And into that 4 chain loop, we're going to do 7 single crochets. So this pattern's in US terminology. So in UK terms, that's a double crochet. But we're going to start off with a little chain 1 for leverage. Don't count that as a stitch. Then putting your hook into the center, so not the first chain, which can look bigger. We need to go into the center of our loop. Then wrapping it around the chains, we do a single crochet, and we want 7 of those. So 1, 2, and it's going to carry the tail end as well, which helps bring in the hole at the end. 3, 4, 5, 6, and 1 more, squeeze 1 more in there, 7. Okay, so 7 single crochet, and if you've carried that tail end, you should be able to pull that hole closed a little bit. Then we're going to slip stitch into our first single crochet. So find your first single crochet and work a slip stitch. Okay, so by the end of the first round you should have 7 single crochet. Then we're going to double up, so we're going to do a little chain 1 to begin. Don't count that as a stitch. And going back into the same stitch we just slip stitched into, we're going to do 2 single crochet. So 1 and another 1 in the same stitch. Okay, and we're going to work 2 single crochet in each stitch around. So we go straight into the next stitch and do 2 single crochet. 1 and 2. And just work 2 single crochet in each stitch around. So we're going from a stitch count of 7 to 14. Okay, so 2 in the next one. It's coming up to the last 2 single crochet, 1 and 2, and check you have a stitch count of 14. And this stitch here is not a stitch, this is what I call the fake stitch, so you want to make sure you skip that as your previous slip stitch. Skip the tiny chain 1 and then slip stitch into your first single crochet. Slip stitch into there. Okay, so we should have a stitch count of 14. And now what we're going to do is we're going to do 1 single crochet in each stitch around. So we're going to keep a stitch count of 14. Start off with a chain 1, don't count that as a stitch. Go back into the same stitch, single crochet you just slip stitched into, and just do 1 single crochet, and we're going to do 1 single crochet in each stitch around, just 1, keeping a stitch count of 14. it's coming up to the end, last single crochet, then just slip stitch into your first single crochet to join the round. Okay, you want it to start popping out in this direction. So now we're going to create his cute little ears. So we're going to do a little chain 1 to begin, go back into the same stitch, you just slip stitch into and do a single crochet. I'm going to do 1 single crochet in the first 5, so that's 1, next stitch 2, next stitch 3, next stitch 4, then next stitch 5. So 1 single crochet in the first 5. Then we're going to chain 4. Let's chain 1, 2, 3 and 4. And in the second chain along, so we don't count the loop on our hook, so our first chain, there's our second. Into there we're going to do a slip stitch. Okay. Then in the next chain, we're going to do a double crochet. So in UK terms, that's going to be a treble. So we yarn over, go into the next chain, pull through 2, pull through 2. Then in the last chain, we do a slip stitch again. Little slip stitch. Okay, and that's his little ear created. Then we do 1 single crochet in the next 8 on the main circle. So find the next clean stitch and do 1 single crochet in the next 8. So 1, next stitch 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 and 8. Then we're going to make his second ear. So same thing again, we're going to chain 4, 1, 2, 3 and 4. I'm going to slip stitch in the second chain along, slip stitch. Then in the next chain a double crochet or treble in UK terms. So pull through 2, pull through 2. Then in the last chain a slip stitch. And then we have 1 stitch left on the main circle. So in the last stitch we do 1 single crochet. That's our fake stitch. So we find our first single crochet and slip stitch into there. Okay, so hopefully it looks something like this. Now what we're going to do is we're going to do 1 single crochet in each stitch around, but we're going to skip the ears. So we're going to do a chain 1. And we should still have a stitch count of 14, not including the ears. So go back into the same stitch you just slip stitched into and do 1 single crochet in the first 5. So 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. Okay, so it's very important to do the first 5. That looks like a stitch, but it's not. That's the beginning of our ear. So what we want to do is the next stitch, you want to look for these 2 little vertical lines underneath. That equals a proper stitch. And you can see that one there doesn't have the 2 line. This one does. So we put our hook into here, bring the yarn through, but then we want to pop that ear to the front. So we want to make sure our ears are on the outside. Give it a nice tug, then yarn over to complete your single crochet. We have 8 single crochet in between the ears. So that was our first one. So next stitch 2, next stitch 3, 4, 5. Let's get this tail end on the inside. There we go. 5. Next stitch. 6. Next stitch. 7, then next stitch 8. Okay, so it's very important to count 8 in between the ears. Remember, this is not a stitch, it doesn't have 2 vertical lines underneath it. So we have 1 stitch, if you remember, from the previous round. So you're following the stitch count from the previous round to find this last stitch here with these 2 little vertical lines. Put your hook into there, bring the yarn through. Bring up a loop and then pop that ear to the front in between your loops on your hook. Okay, then give it a nice tug, put it tight and finish your last single crochet. And the ears are now on the outside. We're going to slip stitch in our first single crochet to finish. Okay, so there we can see his head coming together. And what we're going to do now is we're going to do 1 single crochet in each stitch around. So just keeping a stitch count of 14. So we do a little chain 1, go back into the same stitch we slip stitched into, and just work 1 single crochet in each stitch around, keeping a stitch count of 14. Okay, just going up to the end of that round, the last stitch is tucked behind his ear, so we should have a stitch count of 14. Slip stitch in your first single crochet to join the rounds. I've just done 1 single crochet in each stitch around. Okay, then what we're going to do is a little chain 1, and we're going to single crochet 2 stitches together until the end. And I like to do the invisible decrease, so we're going to start off in the same stitch we just slip stitched into, and to do the invisible decrease, if you don't know it already, we just go onto the front loop instead of both loops. Normally we work into a stitch like this, but we just want to catch that front loop, then immediately bring your hook under the next front loop. So you're going under 2 front loops, bring the yarn through, and then yarn over to do a single crochet. That creates a much flatter decrease. So we're going to do that all the way around. Next stitch, just the front loop. Next stitch, just the front loop. Bring the yarn through, the yarn over, pull through both loops. So single crochet 2 stitches together until the end, and your stitch count will go back down to 7. Just working the last decrease, pull through both loops, and then find your first decrease, and we're going to slip stitch into there. We should have a stitch count of 7. Bring the yarn through. That was my elbow, nothing else, on the table, making rude noises. Okay, so what we're going to do now is just bring up a loop, and we're going to stuff his head at this point. So we're just going to grab some similar yarn. You might have some similar yarn scraps, colours, and we're just going to stuff his head. So I shall do that, grab some similar colours, some greens, and give his head some stuffing. So I shall do that, and then I shall come back. Okay, so I finished stuffing his head. I had some quite a luminous green yarn left over. So I've stuffed the head, and what we're going to do now is bring our hook back into play, and we're going to do a chain 1, and we're going to work 1 single crochet in each stitch around. So we're keeping a stitch count of 7, starting in the same stitch you just slip stitched into. And we're going to do 1 single crochet in each stitch around. We're going to do that for 6 rounds. Okay, so 6 rounds, just keeping a stitch count of 7. Okay, so I shall do that, and then I shall come back. Okay, so 6 rounds of 1 single crochet in each stitch around, keeping a stitch count of 7. Okay, just coming up to the last stitch on the last round, the sixth round. You could just work continuously if you prefer. You don't always have to join rounds. I do that just because it's easier to remember where I am. But if you prefer to work continuously, feel free to do so. And then just slip stitch to join. And hopefully you got something that looks like this. Don't worry, it will come into shape a bit better. And then we're going to cut our yarn, pull the loop through, and you can add a little bit of stuffing to this tube part as well if you want to. So I shall do that and then come back. Let's get a bit more of this luminous green. Okay, so I've added some stuffing, and then we're just going to grab our yarn needle and we're going to draw strings so this close. So to do that, we're going to go into the next stitch, out through the next stitch. Give that a pull. Same again, into the next stitch, out through the next stitch. And just do that all the way around. The camera wants to focus. Into the next stitch, out through the next stitch. A little bit of stuffing still showing through. Get in there. And then at the end, we're just going to sew up to the bottom, and we're going to hide our tail end on the inside. So just sew somewhere, and then up through a stitch. And push our project down, cut close. And our tail end's hidden on the inside. Okay, so hopefully you've got something that looks like this. Squish him into shape a little bit. Now what we're going to do is we're just going to add his little robe and some eyes, and then he's done. Oh, we need some arms as well. So we're going to move on to his robe now. So we're going to grab some brown yarn. And taking our brown yarn, we are going to do, what are we going to do? I'm going to chain 14 to begin. So chain 14, do a little slip knot and chain 14. So 1, 2, 3, 13 and 14. So chain 14, and then we want to, keeping our working yarn at the top, we're going to find our first chain, bring it round into a loop. Let's put our hook into there, into that first chain, and keeping the yarn, our working yarn at the top. We're going to bring the yarn through that first chain and straight through the loop on our hook. Do a slip stitch to create a large loop like this. Then what we're going to do is we're going to do a little chain 1, and going back into that same chain, we're going to do a single crochet. And we want to do 1 single crochet in each chain around, so we can keep a stitch count of 14. Let's find your next chain and do a single crochet. And just work 1 single crochet in each chain around, back to the beginning. Okay, just coming up to the end. And then when you get back to the beginning, we're just going to slip stitch in our first single crochet. So you should have a stitch count of 14 and this large loop like this. Then what we're going to do is just 4 rounds of 1 single crochet in each stitch around. So we're going to chain 1, go back into the same stitch you just slip stitched into, and we're going to crochet 1 single crochet in each stitch around, keeping a stitch count of 14. I'm going to do that for 4 rounds. Okay, so 4 more rounds. I shall do that, and then I shall come back. We should have a little tube shape. Just coming up to the last stitch on the 4th round, then slip stitch to join. And hopefully you've got something that looks like a little tube of stitches. And what we're going to do now is we're just going to do a little chain 1, and we're going to do 1 single crochet in the first 2. So go back into the same stitch you slip stitched into and do a single crochet. Do 1 single crochet in the next stitch. And then we're going to single crochet 2 stitches together. And again, I'm going to do the invisible decrease. So front loop, next stitch, front loop, bring the yarn through, single crochet. I'm going to repeat that up to the last 2 stitches. So we do 1 single crochet in the next 2, 1, next stitch, 2, and then single crochet the next 2 together. So front loop, next front loop, bring the yarn through, single crochet. Okay, so let's repeat that again. So 1 single crochet in the next 2, 1 and next stitch 2, then single crochet the next 2 together, 1 and 2, and I think this is the last repeat. We should have 2 stitches left, and we're just going to do 1 single crochet in the last 2. So 1 single crochet and 1 single crochet in the last stitch. Then we're going to slip stitch in our first single crochet. Okay, so our stitch count should have gone down to 11, I think. And what we're going to do now is, I haven't actually written this down on my pattern, which is interesting. I need to add the next bit. What we're going to do now though is we're going to do a little chain 1 and we're going to create his little collar. And to do that, we're going to do some double crochet front post stitches. Now, if you don't like doing front post stitches, just do normal double crochets in each stitch around. But we're going to yarn over, and starting in the same stitch we just slip stitched into, going to go into there and then come to the front through the next stitch. You end up catching this one bit of yarn. Bring the yarn under there and then do a double crochet. Pull through 2, pull through 2. And do one of those, 1 double crochet front post stitch into each stitch around, so we end up with still have a stitch count of 11. So the next one we yarn over, we start in the second stitch that we came from the back. So we go into there, then the next stitch we come from the back to the front. We end up catching this bit of yarn here, bring the yarn under there and do a double crochet. Okay, but like I said, if this is too fiddly, just work normal double crochets in each stitch around. So the next one starts in the second stitch we came from the back. We go in there from the front this time, then from the back through the next stitch and work a double crochet. Okay, so do that all the way around, keeping a stitch count of 11. Okay, so next one starts where that one's coming out. Okay, just want to count actually. How many have I done? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, 6 more. Okay, then the very last one, I've done 10 so far, and it looks like there's no stitches left because I worked into that last stitch. We go back into the last stitch, but from the front this time, and then we're just going to come through the fake stitch for once, and then work our front post stitch. So we actually work into the fake stitch, one of the rare occasions. Then we just slip stitch into our first double crochet front post stitch. And hopefully you got something that looks like this. And we're just going to cut our yarn, pull our yarn through, and then if we open this out, we've got this little tube shape, and all we need to do now is hide these tail ends. So I'm going to neaten up these tail ends and then come back and show you how to make some little arms. The first thing to neaten off this edge, it's a really nice way of neatening off the ends of rounds is, so we got this yarn here, we worked into this double crochet here, so if we sew into the next double crochet and then go back into this loop here, which is our last stitch, come in from the front, give that a pull. If we neaten this up, it does create neat stitches like that for a nice neat finish. And then I'm just going to hide this tail end. Okay, then do the same for the other tail end. Okay, there we go. And you can choose to have the join at the front if you want, as if that's the front of his coat, or if you prefer, you can just have the nice clean edge. But we're going to grab the head part and we're just going to feed the tube body into his cloak. Should fit, hopefully. And there we go. Get a little squish down. And there he is almost finished. Now we need to create 2 arms and add some eyes. So to do the arms, we are going to get the brown yarn first. And we're going to do a single crochet foundation stitch. So if you've never done this before, don't panic. Hopefully give it a try. We start off with a slip knot and then chain 2. Okay, 1 and 2. We're going to put our hook into our first chain, like so, and bring the yarn through. Okay, we've got 2 loops. Then we're going to yarn over and bring the yarn through the first loop. So we do a chain 1. That creates a foundation chain on the left-hand side. Then we yarn over again, pull through both loops to do the single crochet. Now for our next one, because we need 2 single crochet foundation stitches, we are going to put our hook into this chain we created on the left-hand side. So if you see, you've got 3 vertical bars of yarn. So we skip the first, skip the second, it's this third one, okay? We'll put our hook under there and work into it like a normal stitch. So you need to find another piece of yarn, another loop of yarn. So it almost looks like a normal stitch. Bring the yarn through there, bring up a little loop and do the same thing again. We're going to chain 1, that creates our next foundation chain, then yarn over, pull through both loops. Now if you prefer, you can just do normal chains, but it's a lot more fiddly because we're going to change to the green yarn now. But definitely give it a go if this is really difficult for you, but I actually think it'll end up being more difficult with the colour changes, trying to do normal chains. So what we're going to do now is we're just going to yarn over with the green, do a little chain 1, pull that down, and now we find the next chain on the left hand side that we created and put our hook into there. So again we count the loops, so there's 1 loop, the tiny second loop, and so this third one, that's where our stitch is, that's where our chain is. Go under both loops as if it's a normal stitch, bring the yarn through, then again we do a little next chain 1 as if we were going to work into that again, but we're not, and then yarn over, pull through both loops to do a single crochet. Just pull these tail ends, and that is our little arm created. So we're going to cut our yarn, bring the yarn through, and you, like I said, you can do normal chains. You could chain 4 and work 1 single crochet in the second chain and then change to the end, so you have a stitch count of 3, but doing the colour changes might be really complicated, so definitely try and give this a try. Now what we're going to do is some little knots. So we're going to, the working yarn we just cut here, we're going to sew over into that, kind of into that foundation chain. Doesn't really matter where, just going to sew over to this side to secure. Okay, then turning it over, we're going to sew over to the other green tail end. Okay, and then release the yarn needle. Then we're going to knot our green tail ends. We're going to do the secure knot. So first, the right hand side thread goes over the top to do a normal knot. Okay, and then next time the right hand side goes underneath, and then we knot in the opposite direction. So it always feels a little bit more fiddly to me. Okay, that creates a knot that shouldn't come undone and should allow us to cut our yarn quite close to the knot. Okay, so that creates his little tiny hand. And we want to do the same for the brown yarn now. One of our tail ends is at the bottom by the green, so we need to sew up to the top. sorts of sewing techniques today. And just sew up to the top as neatly as you can. Okay, up to the other tail end. And we're going to tie these in a knot as well. So again, the right hand side goes over the top. We tie this direction, which should feel more normal. Well, if you're not like me. Don't pull too tight because it might just distort the arm. Then next time, the right hand side goes underneath. So it goes underneath and then we tie in the opposite direction. Should stop it coming undone. Okay, but only cut the shorter yarn, okay? You want to keep this for sewing onto the body. So we cut the shorter one, keeping the longer one for sewing onto the body. So let's bring back our little baby Yoda and we're going to sew his arm onto the side. And if you want, you can just pop him out and sew like this, making sure that it's equally on the side. And then just repeat that for the second arm. Okay. And I'm just sewing just under the double crochets, which I forgot to say. Okay, so I shall do that. I shall repeat that for the second arm and sew on the second arm. And then it's almost done. Okay, so I shall do that, then I shall come back. Okay, so I've repeated that for the other arm, and all that's left to do now is give him some eyes. You can sew on a mouth if you want to, but I just did eyes. And we're going to take 2 short lengths of black yarn. I'm going to do little knots like I do in so many of my videos. So we're just going to tie a knot into the middle. And then do the same thing again on top of the previous knot. Do that one more time. Try and get them on top of each other. Okay, and then we're just going to sew that into his head, each end. So kind of maybe 2 stitches over from his ear. Okay, and then we sew the other end. And just to make sure it does catch on the outside, we're just going to grab a little bit of the green yarn as we come through so that those knots sit nicely on the outside. Okay, and then we just hide our tail ends and do the same for the second eye, and then we're done. So I'll do that and then you can come and see what he looks like at the end. And there we go. I've just repeated that for the second eye and hidden the tail ends. And there we go. That's our finished Baby Yoda. I feel like the first one I do off camera is always better, but I hope you enjoyed that tutorial. And yeah, so there we go. He is finished. Cute little Baby Yoda. So I hope you enjoyed that tutorial, hope you managed to follow along, and if you love Star Wars, make a tiny cute little Baby Yoda. It's perfect as a keyring, and maybe I'll design some more little characters this big. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Are you a Star Wars fan or are you a Star Trek fan? Let me know. And I'd like to say again a huge thank you to all my Membership Plus members for helping make these videos possible. So thank you guys. Do check out my Member Plus area on my website for extra exclusive content. So, and I will see you soon for some more crochet fun. Thanks for watching, guys. Bye.